Unfortunately, we have some shocking statistics to share with you. Rent prices in the US are at historic highs despite recent declines in vacancy rates, ranging from 2% to 6%. The data from Realtor.com shows that less than 6% of rental units were vacant as of January 27th, and demand for rentals is at an all-time high. This has resulted in a burden for 44 million Americans across the country. The rental crisis has forced many low-income workers to pay over 55% of their income to rent a one-bedroom rental unit, which has left them in extreme financial distress. The rising rental costs have increased the risk of eviction, and there are no policies in place to prevent a potential eviction tsunami. Advocates have alerted that the rent crisis is threatening to spark a national catastrophe. The middle-class households who make $4,340 per month are paying more than 41% of their income on rent. In contrast, official housing agencies claim that anyone who spends more than 30% of their income on rent is considered cost-burdened. It means that workers may have to struggle to afford necessities such as food and transportation. Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies and Moody's Analytics research shows that for the first time in more than 2 decades, every state has low and middle-income renters who are nearing a financial breaking point due to low rent affordability. Additionally, almost half of Americans now struggle with a growing percentage of their income going towards keeping a roof over their heads. Many households have been priced out of home ownership, forcing would-be buyers to remain renters. This has caused apartment demand to surge, and rent has risen disproportionately compared to income growth. Renters living in communities of color, high poverty, and low-income neighborhoods are more likely to experience severe financial problems, according to Harvard's JCHS. Moreover, researchers say that people need to earn $24.90 per hour to afford a rental home without spending more than 30% of their income, which is considered a general guideline for a healthy personal budget. Unfortunately, almost 1/3 or 32% of the American workforce earns less than $15 per hour, putting them in a harrowing position where they can barely afford rent, transportation to work, and food and utility costs. The Census Bureau states that the average middle-class household income in 2022 was $70,784, while that of low-income earners was only $43,695. In addition, the federal government sets poverty guidelines each year, which are used to determine eligibility for certain government programs. In 2021, the poverty guideline for a single-person household in the contiguous United States is an annual income of $12,880, while the poverty guideline for a family of 4 is an annual income of $26,500. One of the most concerning aspects of the rental crisis in America is the rising eviction rates. Many renters are finding it increasingly difficult to make ends meet, with rent prices reaching historic highs and wage growth stagnating. According to recent data, eviction rates are rising fast, and there are no policies in place to prevent an eviction tsunami. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more information on important topics that affect the everyday life of the American working class. The eviction process usually starts with a written notice to the tenant, stating the reason for the eviction and the deadline for vacating the premises. For example, if a tenant is consistently behind on rent payments, the landlord may issue a notice to pay or quit, giving the tenant a certain amount of time to either pay the rent or move out. If the tenant fails to comply with the notice, the landlord can file a lawsuit to evict the tenant. The tenant will receive a summons to appear in court, where they will have the opportunity to present their case. If the court rules in favor of the landlord, they will issue an eviction order, which gives the tenant a specific date by which they must vacate the property. If the tenant still fails to leave the property by the specified date, the landlord can file for a writ of possession, which allows them to enlist the help of law enforcement to physically remove the tenant and their belongings from the property. Housing experts warn that the rent crisis is threatening to spark a national catastrophe, with millions of Americans at risk of losing their homes. In many states, eviction proceedings have already resumed, and tenants are being forced to leave their homes. the looming eviction crisis has prompted advocates to call for urgent action from policymakers. Despite the severity of the rental crisis, few solutions are being proposed by policymakers. In fact, the rising cost of rent has become a political issue in many states, with some lawmakers proposing legislation that would make it even harder for renters to find affordable housing. In conclusion, the rental crisis in America is reaching unprecedented levels, with rent prices at historic highs and eviction rates on the rise. The lack of affordable housing options for low-income workers and families is a major factor contributing to the rental crisis in America. While new multifamily construction is gaining momentum, most new construction is geared toward middle and upper-income households. This leaves many low-income workers with few options for affordable housing, and as a result, many are forced to spend a disproportionate amount of their income on rent. Additionally, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the rental crisis in America, as many renters have lost their jobs or seen their incomes reduced due to the economic downturn. With unemployment rates still high in many parts of the country, many renters are struggling to make ends meet and are at risk of falling behind on their rent payments. The federal government has taken some steps to address the rental crisis, including providing rental assistance to low-income renters through the COVID-19 relief packages. However, these measures are temporary, and more needs to be done to address the root cause of the rental crisis and assure that all Americans have access to affordable housing. One potential solution to the rental crisis is to invest in the development of affordable housing units for low-income workers and families. This would not only provide much-needed housing options for those struggling to afford rent, but would also create jobs and stimulate economic growth. Another solution is to increase the minimum wage, which would help to ensure the low-income workers are not forced to choose between paying rent and buying food or other essentials. However, increasing the minimum wage is a controversial issue, with some arguing that it would lead to job losses and hurt small businesses. In the short term, policymakers should focus on providing rental assistance to those in need and implementing policies to prevent evictions and homelessness. This could include extending the eviction moratorium, which was put in place to protect renters during the COVID-19 pandemic, but has since expired in many parts of the country. Additionally, policymakers should explore creative solutions to the rental crisis, such as incentivizing landlords to provide affordable housing options or encouraging the development of co-housing communities where multiple families share living spaces and expenses. In conclusion, the rental crisis in America is a complex issue with no easy solutions. Rent prices are at historic highs, while wages remain stagnant for many Americans. Low-income workers are being hit the hardest, with many struggling to afford basic necessities due to the high cost of rent. Unless policymakers make urgent action to address the rental crisis, millions of Americans could be at risk of losing their homes, and the economic and social consequences could be severe. It's time for policymakers to come together and find creative solutions to the pressing issue before it's too late. Thank you for watching and learning about the state of housing in the US. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more informative content. Up next, we have a suggested video for you. Click at the top of the screen to watch.